All right, so I want to talk one more thing before I assign your homework for this lesson, and that is what's the difference between simple interest and compound interest. And it's really important for us to understand the difference between these different types of interest calculations, because that helps you figure out which one you need to use. So if you pick the wrong formula on a test, for example, I can't give you any credit. So I really need to make sure that you know how to figure out which formula to use. So we'll spend some time doing that, and a really good way to do that is to think about the difference between the two concepts. And so if I'm talking about simple interest versus compound, I usually think about a couple of things. The three questions that I like to ask are, how often is interest calculated? Do you make regular deposits or just deposit a large chunk of money at one time? And how good is the return on your investment? So for simple interest, when I answer that first question, how often is interest calculated? It's calculated one time at the end of the investment period. Okay, and if we answer the next question, do you make regular deposits? No, there was just one chunk of money at the beginning that you deposit. And then I'm thinking, what else I know? How good is your return? Simple interest is going to be not very much interest because you aren't compounding every month or every year, so it's not going to have as great of a return as compound. So it's going to be small return on investment. And then what I like to do is think about the other type of interest that we're comparing. So we wrote up information about simple interest, and now I'd like to look at compound interest and answer those same questions. So for simple interest, we said, how often is interest calculated? One time at the end of the investment period. And with compound interest, it's a little bit different, remember. Here we'll do n times per year, and that could be monthly, quarterly, annually, etc. But it's however number of times we say we're compounding in a year, it's that times the number of years that will compound over the life of the deposit that you make. And then, do you make regular deposits or a large chunk of money at one time? For compound interest, it's the same as simple interest. There's one chunk deposited at the beginning. And this has a better return on the investment than simple because of the number of times that you compound and the fact that you put the interest back in. So better return than simple interest. And so if I was being asked what's the difference between simple interest and compound interest, I would want to write a sentence that explains that difference, but I can use this T-chart to help me find things to say. What I've written is the difference between simple and compound interest is how often the interest is calculated, and that's kind of summarizing this row of our table. With simple interest, you calculate only one time, while with compound interest, you calculate n times per year. And then I could write one more statement here that would say compounding yields more interest. And that kind of summarizes this last row on the table. So that would be my answer for the difference between the two. And remember that this activity of thinking about the difference between two formulas, even if I don't ask you to do it, just ask yourself every now and then, well, what's the difference between this type of formula and a different one? Because what happens is you start to categorize and look for patterns and look for characteristics that help you identify when to use a formula and which formula to use. So it's very valuable for you to do this what's the different exercise.